All right. I believe maybe this means we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, tech fans of all shapes and sorts and sizes and persuasions, welcome to another episode of the Monday Morning Tech Chat Show on the SGGQA podcast channel. I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, aka Some Gadget Guy, the SGG of this terribly named podcast series. But the QA is the important part because that obviously stands for question and answers. We like to make this a bit more of a conversation, an interactive conversation, as we kind of look at some of the biggest tech news stories that have kind of crossed our news feeds and social media feeds. I'm already seeing an incredible group here in the chat. Simon says Hypno, Ron Guido, J-Man 150. J-Man, we've been talking about was it National Water Day, World Water Day, something like that. We got Grounded Tech. We got Barry Johnson, Kapakash. We've got, I said Simon, Corcoran, Darren, Pakistan. I'm missing people in here. I am apologizing for missing people. Dave Burns, mind your helm. We've got some folks saying good morning. Good morning. Now, this is normally where we would be talking about some kind of like pajama podcast. It's the last Monday of the month. Want to keep this super casual, super chill. But in light of one of the major news stories that's come out over the last couple of days, while I want to keep this one, this vibe just kind of a little bit more chill, kind of open it up and really interact with chat. I mean, I'm really going to go where the chat leads us. There are a trio of stories that I want us to kind of focus on first, and then you can keep me rambling for the rest of the show after that. So it's kind of a hybrid show. We did a pajama podcast at the beginning of March because I absolutely needed the time off the first week of March, and this isn't quite the pajama podcast. But we want to loosely touch on, and also, I mean, I kind of feel like these are stories that kind of need a little bit of time. And every time I start talking about like Apple and the DOJ case that's coming up, being able to sort of talk through some of it helps me understand better what it is that I think is good and what I'm concerned about. And there's a lot of moving parts. This is a really big deal, and this is kind of a regulatory action that's been about a decade in the making. So I don't want us to just like casually go over a headline and then say, ooh, government bad, or ooh, Apple bad. And then we're all kind of entrenched in the same bias camps that we were in before. There's some really interesting stuff to kind of take a look at more than just reading someone else's analysis of it. And I find that most of the editorials that I've read so far, even from like unbiased legal scholars who are now joining this conversation, no, there's a fair amount of opinion going in on the opinions offered by the DOJ. So I felt like we could spend just a little time, like really kind of unpack some of this stuff and kind of start building some expectations on what do we think is going to happen, and then what do we want to have happen from this, because it's not just a court case in a vacuum. It is the examination of every big tech business practice that we've kind of befallen over the last 10 years. I mean, this is a court case. I mean, our ability to regulate the internet is probably a decade behind the actual internet. So it's important that we get this stuff right. The best time to have regulated big tech and data brokers and info and carriers and ISPs was 20 years ago. The second best time to regulate all of those industries is today. Dave Burns, unbiased legal scholars, is an insult to words. I love it. I love it. All right, hold on. Let me take a sip of coffee. Simon says, if no, I keep an open mind that Apple can be both bad and also awful too. Snorkel Bill H. It's SGGI Takedown Day. Ba-boom. So, I hope everybody had a lovely weekend. I am absolutely loving softball season. I have been drafted as the fifth assistant parent coach in my daughter's softball team. I have a miserable arm. I'm throwing to like 8 and 9 year olds, and they're whipping the ball back harder than I can throw. There are already 9 year olds that are throwing like 20 to 30 mile per hour windmill pitches, and we hit against a pitcher yesterday, a 9 year old who's throwing effective changeups. I cannot express how shocked I am at the level of play and fielding and pitching that 8 to 10 year olds are capable of. I don't, I probably should not have been as surprised as I am, but let me tell you, I had to warm up our second pitcher for the game yesterday, and I caught just, like I have a cheap mitt. It's not like a fancy catcher's mitt. This is like $50 at Target, just something so I could go play catch with my daughter. And I'm crouched in the in my because I used to be a catcher when I was in little league, little league. So I'm talking like 30 years ago. And I'm crouched in my catcher's position, and she whips the ball, and I catch it like right in the palm of my hand, not in the sort of outer glove. And I had to stop for a sec, just a split second, because like my hand was tingling. I was like, oh, well, there you go. I really need to get in shape. So we had a lovely time. And then also we did a daddy-daughter project. Our bathroom sink was clogged, and it was super, super gross. And my wife has been kind of tackling sort of our end of financial year 2023 taxes and statements and filing business licenses and all that stuff. So I was like, you know what? I got to get Lex out of her hair, because Lex is like every 5 minutes, hey, Mom, do you want to do this? I need to focus on the taxes, dear. Okay, yeah, that's right. And then like 5 minutes later, oh, Mommy, you want to see my new Barbie? Lex, gotta focus on the taxes. So I pull Lex, we go upstairs, I get out a monkey wrench, and we just start disassembling the sink. And it was actually really cool. Again, my daughter's 8, so she's at the holding flashlight stage of assistance and maintenance. But we explained every part. We explained why the trap has this funky shape to it. I'm looking at like, there are a bunch of really terrible building decisions in the condo that we bought. Like, you can tell this was a poorly managed rental before we bought it. We've like piecemeal by piecemeal replacing all this stuff around the house. But by the end of it, like, she understood all the parts. She even understood the difference in tightening couplings, because like on the bottom of the U, it's inverted. It's upside down. So you kind of have to imagine your righty tighty, lefty loosey opposite, how you would actually spin that part. And it was really, really lovely. Also, it was flippin' gross. So both me and this 8-year-old girl, so gross. So we had a really good time. But I can't express enough, like the dad parts of this, I'm really digging. And I hope everybody out there has had lovely interactions with their parents, or maybe you are the parent that's trying to teach some stuff to your kids, and it slows you way down. Like, I could have disassembled that sink in minutes, hosed it out, put it all back together again. It ended up becoming like kind of a 2-hour project all told. But then she was actually legitimately helping on stuff. So I'm holding this gunky U-joint, and I'm like, oh, shoot. How am I going to get this downstairs and outside? Oh, you know what, Lex? Can you do this, this, and this? And she was like, on it. And she wasn't very efficient at it, but she got all of the parts done so that I didn't make a mess all over the house. And it was those kinds of things like, oh, I hope she actually kind of sticks. Like, some of this actually kind of sticks. Like, she did good work for never having done any plumbing before as an 8-year-old. I don't know why I'm saying it that way. It was a really lovely exchange. It was a really lovely interaction. So, as of next week, Juan teaches his daughter how to chimney sweep. Chim chimney. I just got a copyright strike. Yeah, she loves Mary Poppins, so she probably already knows more about chimney sweeping than I can teach her. Kids today, they just grow up so fast. The kids, they yearn for the mines. I'm just putting them to work. So, again, I hope everybody out there had a lovely weekend, and that you got a little downtime. You got to do some fun stuff, and you got to do some family stuff. Or at least, if not family stuff, at least some good, like, hanging out with friends stuff. We have, I got my phone right next to my speaker. All those 5G radiations that cause my speakers to start popping whenever, like, a text message comes in. So we do have just a little bit of housekeeping that I want to cover. And one of the bits in housekeeping is something we're going to talk a lot about. So I'm not going to spend too much time here, but just a brief pause because Gabaletta has subscribed with Prime, subscribed for 20. Oh, wait, where's Gab? Where's Gab? I just lost his chat. Oh, come on. I think there's something up with the Twitch chat because I can see Twitch chat that I can't see over in my restream chat. So Gab, I would put up this message, but it's totally gone. I apologize. But you also do get this fanfare of glory that I hope works, courtesy of one Mr. Barry Johnson who hooked me up with Stream Deck. Thank you so much for supporting production on this podcast. I saw some levels play. I hope I just didn't blow out every headphone user's eardrums there. Apologies if that came in. Again, my audio setup, just something breaks every stream. I still can't hear the fanfare coming back. Oh, Gabaletta said it worked. Okay, good. Well, thank you again for supporting and again, for everybody who's like sharing and reviewing podcasts on your favorite podcast services, and then also, maybe joining on the Twitch, that kind of stuff. It really does help keep this stream rolling. Grounded Tech. I removed my headphones just in time. Doing it right. Doing it right, Dan. Doing it right. Thanks, Simon. I appreciate it. The lame fanfare worked well. I wrote that trumpet fanfare. That is an original composition from yours truly. You didn't know that I was also a terrible musician. All right. Just a little bit of housekeeping here. I don't even know if I set this up. All right, let's see if I screen share properly. Hey, there it is. There's somegadgetguy.com, the website. One of the big videos that went up last week, OnePlus 12 versus Pixel 8 Pro premium price tags. This was in early access on the Patreon. It just went live to my main YouTube channel. And you know how I like to kind of stage a philosophical conversation between what different manufacturers are trying to achieve. And to spoil this video, I still come to the conclusion that you genuinely probably shouldn't be recommending both of these phones in earnest to the same consumer. And that's not a slight against either one of those brands, because I genuinely love my experiences with Pixels and I genuinely love my experiences with OnePluses. I think Google has built a really great phone platform, communicator platform around the Pixel. And I think OnePlus is delivering some of the most disruptive high performance devices we've seen this year. And you put those two head to head, and it should be pretty easy. It really should not be difficult for those of us techies, like the folks that I've got in this chat right now. Someone asks you about an opinion on a new phone, and within a couple questions, we should be able to guide someone one direction or the other. If it's, a more hardware-based discussion coming from that individual, well, then there are certain choices that you'd want to make. If it's certain photography choices from an individual, we should be able to guide and make a decision. If it's certain software software aspects that they care about. I really bristle at this idea that the phone is a singular appliance, a one-size-fits-all kind of basic tool, and that there's an average. There is no average. There is no such thing as an average consumer, and I think a huge chunk of the smartphone market are folks walking around with devices that are not really the right fit for their needs. And so this is always an opportunity. I don't do nearly as many comparisons as I used to, because usually you just get beat up in the comments for whatever phone is more statistically search popular. That army of fans want to see you say that their pick was the winner. And that's not really what a good comparison should be. It should be sort of an active exchange of pros and cons. No one wants to hear the phone that you spent $1,000 on has some parts that might not be as gooder as another phone that costs a lot less. That makes them feel ouchies in their feels. So that's not how you succeed at YouTube. If you would like to make more money at YouTube, watch my channel for about a month and then just do the opposite of what I do. And then you'll make more money on YouTube. But I digress. See, Alsa Bockley, this is kind of what I'm talking about here. My Pixel basically organizes my life and my small business, not an overstatement. And I feel like as a companion device, a companion communicator, that's a strong feel that I have on Pixels. Gabaletta, my Pixel has held my SIM card the longest over my Z Fold. I've had this feeling since the Pixel 4 XL, where I was a Samsung knight and then I was an LG nerd, and then a Pixel would arrive and I wouldn't think that much of it. Capabilities, I'm a hardware guy. Like, okay, this is Google's flavor of Android, totally get it. And then I would make it to the end of the year and I'd kind of do just a little assessment on how long each phone kind of held my SIM card. And Pixels were often right up there, mixing it up against the hardware platforms that I like the most. So it's really it's still a really nuanced discussion, and it's exhausting having to deal with people who leave comments on tech enthusiast sites still doing the, oh, but I mean, like, phones are basically the same. They've always been for like the last 10 years. There's like nothing different. And you're like, I really, at this point, I'm starting to just mute those comments in my YouTube videos too. Like, you've contributed nothing except to waste everybody's time. So if I just mute your comment, at least you've only wasted my time and not like anyone else in my audience's time. So it's pretty great. Jermaine. YouTube. Shock faces, praise the big two, down talk the rest, and be overhyped. There you go. That is a recipe for a formula for success currently on YouTube. And then also, like, whatever whim YouTube decides that they want to focus on that year. If it's short form videos, then just change up your entire production schedule. Change up your entire style and just do what YouTube wants you to do, and then you'll be successful on YouTube. I could run a YouTube guru site, right? Like, you don't need to go to some like other consultant or something. Like, I'll tell you, it's great. This is how you do it. If you just have to not care about anything except succeeding on YouTube, and then you too can succeed on YouTube. Sorry, let's finish up housekeeping. The other major video that went up last week was part of a field trip. Snapdragon X Elite hands-on gaming benchmarks and Windows on ARM. Now, if you'll notice, in this title, there is no review. I got so many angry PC nerds, like the kind of folks that would go over to like a Gamers Nexus or a Hardware Unboxed, and I love Gamers Nexus and Hardware Unboxed. This is no slight against the channels, but there is a certain kind of PC enthusiast who goes to those channels because they feel entitled to an hour-long video that they're only going to watch a couple minutes of, but they need to know that the host did all of the work, but they're not going to reward the host with actual watch time. They're just going to go to the one segment or the one benchmark or the one game result that they care about, and they demand that you read the bar graphs to them. Now, I didn't do that because this is kind of a continuation of the data that we already had, that Qualcomm already put out. So if you've already read the benchmarks and the bar graphs, I'm not contributing much to that conversation in terms of numbers and PowerPoint presentation slides. What I am doing is kind of confirming what the real world, the real life experience was of seeing those things in action. And to me, that's a walk and talk vlog. That's not a scientific, I'm set up in the lab, let me break down all of these results, how those results were managed and gathered, because this is a very different turning point in the discussion of Windows computer performance. And there are a ton of unanswered questions that we'll get to when we kind of chat out X Elite and Snapdragon and Windows on ARM. But I can't tell you how many people like, this is a big old nothing burger video. I mean, why would you even call this I had one person actually say, why would you even call this a review? And I don't know, and I might be doing this wrong. Someone please correct me in my comments if in this title, Snapdragon X Elite hands-on gaming benchmarks and Windows on ARM, that I maybe mistakenly added the word review in there. Because it was not just one comment. I had one comment that was, why would you even call this a review? Literally quote. And when I replied, I wrote out a reply that was literally, where the F did I say this was a review? And I said it that. I said, where the capital F did I say this was a review? And then that person deleted their comment. So at least I didn't have to trim that person out of this like commentary. But so many have just now started piling on with this idea that with limited access to a Qualcomm built test platform that is not what any kind of consumer hardware is going to resemble. I mean, it might resemble, but this is not a consumer facing machine. This is an internal reference design from Qualcomm that somehow we were supposed to publish granular, in depth testing protocols on canary builds and beta software and early access, and that was going to somehow be meaningful information to a purchasing decision for a computer that no one's ever going to be able to buy. And that's where I run into some conflict with my fellow PC brethren, because there's no nuance there. Boy, howdy, there's no like, oh, I understand what this part of it is, and now here are the challenges that I'm talking about in this video, and then all of the unknowns that we won't see until Samsung, Microsoft, HP, Dell, Lenovo start building actual systems. I gotcha. No, 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 no. It was, how come you didn't, like, test Battlefield? So crazy. And again, I've been having this debate with PC nerds in public for about 6 years now. And then also I kept like poking at HEDT system builders when I was over at Newegg. I don't know why I like ruffling the feathers on brand fans to such an enormous degree, but it's like, man, I'm trying to get a point across, and you're purposely missing the point because you only want to focus on one benchmark score. And that is not how you use your computer, but that's what you care about in judging whether or not the computer you bought is the winner somehow. And that's why we've been stuck in this Intel AMD duopoly. It's why we've been stuck in this NVIDIA versus AMD, and it's taken so long for Intel to kind of like crack into the GPU market. And it's why we've been so slow to talk about consumer machines adopting better hardware, Windows on ARM. As soon as Microsoft tries anything that somehow interferes with Windows 2000 legacy app support, you've got a bunch of loudmouth tech nerds freaking out, even though that's not really how consumers use their machines these days. So, we'll cover that in greater detail too. But I was just really stoked to put a video together and have it come together so quickly. I really haven't done. I'm out of shape for cutting travel vlogs and sort of editorializing stuff that I'm getting in that moment. I've gotten so kind of comfortable post-pandemic in getting this information, using a product, writing out bullet points or writing out a full script, and polishing all of that presentation out that, just firing up a phone camera, talking directly to that phone camera and sharing some thoughts was I was out of shape. It was kind of a foreign feeling doing that again. And then I also just want to highlight one major post. It took me way too long to finish this, y'all. Over on the Patreon, my camera reviews are Patreon exclusives, and I did not do a video for the Note 24, but I did write 5,000 words on what it was like to use the Note 24. So if you would like kind of my general rundown, how I usually put my videos together, but more of as a written editorial with some photo and video samples embedded, that is now live on thepatreon.com/somegadgetguy. I don't know why I keep shooting myself in the foot like that. It's just patreon.com. But I just think it's so amusing to talk about websites with the article "the" in front of them, as if there's some sort of self-importance to that. And Patreon isn't doing that. I'm doing that to Patreon. And it's really not a good look. And I should probably stop doing stuff like that, but I don't know why I think it's so amusing. And for a lot of this, as I'm talking to everybody here in the live chat and hopefully to folks out in the replay crew, love my replay crew, I'm also kind of just talking to myself in a way. It's this weird split audience where I have to do inside jokes with myself, but then also acknowledge that other people might listen to them too. So I apologize. If you wanted 5,000 words on the Note 24 camera, the subheadline to this is "In Danger of Losing the Ultra Badge." I have very strong feelings about Samsung's current phone philosophy in general, and I have a lot of thoughts. I have 5,000 words on where their camera philosophy is going. And you know what? Again, I'm going off on a tangent here, but I recently did that editorial again on the Patreon. It'll go live this week on somegadgetguy.com. But I did that point and shoot versus premium phone camera comparison. And the camera that I used to kind of emulate what a nicer point and shoot super zoom-ish kind of lens would be was my Samsung Galaxy camera. I pick up this camera, which has basically a mini Android 4 tablet built into the back of this camera. And there were so many good ideas here. And it was really just kind of a product ahead of its time. And if we could imagine what we could do today with a current 1-inch type sensor on a super zooming lens with a proper computer that could manage data, communications, editing as like a tablet. Like say you took this and then you plugged this into a larger display and your super zoom camera becomes the computer brain that edits the photos and edits the video. There's so much more that we could be doing in this space. And especially in terms of mobility and streamlining and bringing better tools to artists and journalists. To me, this becomes first and foremost a journalist tool, and one that we're kind of overlooking and neglecting. Had so much fun just picking this thing up again and seeing some good ideas at play, just kind of hampered by the technology of its time and how we could have grown from that point on. And it makes me even a little more frustrated with the current flavor of Samsung. Because this was the era of Samsung where I was the most insufferable Samsung knight. It was like a year after this that I swapped all of my Canon gear and invested headlong into Samsung NX mirrorless camera gear. This was like the exciting, disruptive era of Samsung trying everything in the kitchen sink. And then, unfortunately, what we have today is a Samsung that's very iterative and very conservative and is not taking any chances. And you're like, well, I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand with what we see happening in the market and with sales and with market penetration and with figures on who's adopting more users and what price tier. I just feel like we have good data to suggest that this trend isn't working, and yet it seems to be what Samsung is doubling down on. So here, let me just kind of make sure I'm not like way off. There's a bunch of commentary happening here in the chat. I'm way behind. Grounded Tech PC Master Race. Grounded Tech also. There's nerds and then there's entitled nerds. And again, I appreciate it. Someone left another comment like, well, I appreciate content creators that value my time and put chapter headings in their videos. And you're like, all right, I appreciate commenters that do things like share people's videos. If you want to meet me halfway, let's do it. Otherwise, I'm not spending the extra time just to make you feel gratified in watching my video. Gabaletta, if I can have this hardware on a handheld that only uses 15 watt max, but similar performance as the Z1 Extreme, that would be fantastic. We're definitely going to get into that. Simon says Hypno. They don't understand what a review actually is. And I'm very careful to use that word review on reviews. Through Jermaine's lens, you should add the word review. Comments mean interactions. YouTube loves that. Like all I have to do is sacrifice my soul and my credibility and what little journalistic integrity I have, and I too could be successful on YouTube. Gabaletta, I was going to read this editorial, but some punchable face came on and I had to watch that first. Through Jermaine's lens. Note 24, forgot I had that. Yeah, because there is no Galaxy S24 Ultra. It's a shame because I think there would be some consumers out there who would love to have all of the premium features, but will probably never use the S Pen. And it's a shame that Samsung just completely gave up on all of those people. You know, it's pretty great. Kapakash, the Mastodons, the Twitters, the Instagrams, the etc. I mean, don't call it Facebook. Call it the Facebook. That's more self-important. Oh yeah, grounded tech. I got stick a few times for saying the Galaxy Ultra wasn't really that ultra when it came to the cameras, and I mean not to spoil 5,000 words on Patreon because those camera deep dives and camera reviews are kind of one of the main hooks of occasionally chipping me a buck to read on my Patreon, but it is such a weird feeling where at once I'm not excited and I'm fairly disappointed in the current flavor of Samsung products. On the other hand, I also feel like I need to defend Samsung against people who really don't know WTF they're talking about when it comes to smartphone cameras, optics, and sensors. And I've mentioned this in the article, and I'm spoiling a little piece of this article. But Samsung fans, quick beat here. I need to speak to the most diehard of diehard Samsung knights. I have come to despise Samsung as a brand for what they represent and how they manage their media appearance and how so many tech journalists now sort of equate Samsung with being de facto Android, especially here in North America. I don't like it. I don't want to support it. I push back aggressively against it because that's not what I believe Android should represent. And I don't think Samsung is doing their job in being the standards bearer for Android. I think they're letting us down. That being said, with the Galaxy S24 Ultra, I'm even going to call it by its listed name because it's a Note, but it's an S Ultra, whatever. If you've come across any kind of tech commentary that points to something like the telephoto camera, the new periscope telephoto camera on the S24 Ultra, and that individual shrugs it off or mentions that, oh, well, Samsung cut it from a 10x zoom to a 5x zoom, and anything in their tone indicates that, like, Samsung was just shrugging, or I guess Mr. Samsung just wanted to make a crappier product, as if that was some kind of downgrade. I mean this from my whole heart and my whole chest. Mute that person. That person will never contribute anything of substance or meaning to an informed tech conversation. You will never miss that individual, that channel, that news outlet, that website ever again. They have perfectly demonstrated they don't know what they're talking about. They're not really covering the product for what it's capable of, and that all they've been doing is wasting your time by reading the specs off at you. You can read the specs on your own. You don't need them to read the specs for you. And to then read the specs and misinterpret how big a change that really is. So mute them, move on with your life, and enjoy the product that you own, but please stay out of my comments if you're a diehard knight that just wants to argue. That's my PSA for all you fine folks today. I got a few more people joining the chat here. I'm seeing Scoop. I'm seeing Dr. Claw. I love it. Michael Corcoran. All right, we got some folks. Gormlord. Excellent. Good, 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 good. Let me get this out of the way here. So, Bionic Scoop. I remember our conversation about the 10X and I made a video about it. Now, here's someone you should listen to. Someone who knows WTF they're talking about. When it comes to lenses and optics, Scoop is an incredible photographer. So maybe listen to him instead of some nerd who's, oh, but they took the super zoom and they turned it from a 10X to a 5X. 10 is a bigger number than 5, so Samsung must be making a poopy product now. So just, I promise you, they have nothing to offer you if that is the level of discourse or conversation or nuance that they're capable of delivering. Again, it's going to feel weird, but just turn them off and ignore them. This is also the important part too. You've got to ignore them, because if you go out of your way to like argue or try and like talk about them on social media like they've made this terrible mistake, all you're doing is bringing them more traffic. So then you are advertising for them to be stupid, and they make more money on you being frustrated. If you just shut them off, then you aren't contributing to their clickbait success. And you can start highlighting, and then this goes hand in hand. You share people like Scoop who know what they're talking about, and that then those people will get more attention and they'll be able to deliver better information than these websites and reviewers who are only looking at dumb consumer metrics and measurements. H2 Otaku. LOL 10x zoom on my Note 22 is really hard to use. The result being that I really don't use it, or usually don't use it. Reducing it to 5x on the new one sounds like an improvement. Tech nerds can be so bad at their own hobby. Truer words, my friend, because what we're about to do is showcase how Juan doesn't know WTF he's talking about. Oh, sorry, real quick. Kapakash. This is something my uncle used to say, and I think it was originally attributed to like Mark Twain, but I don't know if this quote really did come from him. Kapakash says, "Never argue with fools." How did my uncle used to phrase it? Never argue with an idiot. He'll drag you down to their no. Never argue with an idiot. He'll drag you down to his level and then beat you with his years of experience. It's something like that. It wasn't. Again, my uncle is really funny, and so however that quote used to play out. Someone try and find me the origination of that quote, please, because he would always credit Mark Twain. I'm not sure that's a Mark Twain quote, but something akin to that came from somewhere, and I would love to know the origination of that. Yeah, Darren, exactly. It was almost exactly that. Never argue with an idiot. They'll drag you down to their level and beat you with experience. But I don't know. I don't know who to credit for saying that first. It's just I heard it first from my uncle. The same uncle who we've been talking about in episodes past. He's the guy I reference who finally retired his Galaxy S9 and picked up Sony Xperia. So yeah, again, good times. So, two major news stories. One that just kind of broke this morning. Well, I guess it broke this morning here in the United States. Boy howdy, I am not a lawyer, but I really do try to follow up on regulatory issues, and especially as it pertains here in the United States. Anytime anything from the FCC pops up, I'm trying to cover it. Oh, Darren Morris is saying George Carlin. That sounds like Carlin. I'm going to have to look this up. I really want to see if there's got to be some point where that quote came from. Carlin sounds spot on. Like, that sounds like the kind of witty reversal of language that Carlin is just so tactically good at. Okay, sorry. The biggie, of course, is Apple versus the DOJ. But the story that just launched this morning, I feel should also be sort of the gleeful regulatory wonk spectator sport as we watch more play in the EU happen because of the DMA. And this one's lovely because it's likely drawing in several big tech companies, and it's not as easily pigeonholed into an Apple versus everybody else kind of argument. That's been the frustration point. Like, I haven't been on Threads since the DOJ announced their lawsuit. I can't tell you how my feed was just dominated by angry iPhone nerds. People who never care about anything in the government space, never care about anything in regulations, always talk trash about Android, now really up in their feels that someone might be criticizing anything Apple en masse. That's what Facebook has decided I need to see in my Threads feed. So I've basically just been off Threads because it makes no sense to try and wade into all of these hot contested legal debates from the greatest legal scholars, the greatest legal minds of our generation, barely stringing sentences together on threads. Kapakash. Deep cut. All right, that's pretty good. Kapakash quoting Proverbs 26:4-5. Don't answer the foolish arguments of fools, or you will become as foolish as they are. Dag, yo. All right. Well done. You got me there. Oh, man. Okay. Really quickly, this is, and what I'm linking, sorry, normal pattern of my podcast, this is long past when I would say, okay, out of housekeeping and all of the links and all of the stories and articles and even the housekeeping links, everything's going to be available on somegadgetguy.com. I am not linking editorials. So when you go to somegadgetguy.com and I know most people usually kind of skip this part because you subscribe to the podcast in a feeder or you watch the replay on Twitch. All of my links for these stories are directly to the press announcements and the actual filings from the European Commission and from the DOJ. And that's a major part of what I want us to talk about this week, is not someone said that a lawyer looked at this and wrote an article with their thoughts on it, and then that was filtered yet again. Why do that? None of the language in a DOJ or an EU filing is particularly difficult to get through. If you can operate a web browser, you can read through the filings yourself. They're pretty clear, they're pretty direct, and you can start forming your own opinions on the direction of these cases. And that's what I would like everybody to do. It's a PDF, it's long, but it's actually kind of a fascinating read. And from the EU, I don't know too many people, too many reasonable tech enthusiasts who actually like competition. I don't know too many people who are going to be horrifically stunned by this move from the EU. So a press release published March 25, 2024, Commission opens non-compliance investigations against Alphabet, Apple, and Meta under the Digital Markets Act. I'm going to take a quick sip of coffee here, just leaving this up on the screen for a sec. Today, the Commission has opened non-compliance investigations under the Digital Markets Act into Alphabet's rules on steering in Google Play and self-preferencing on Google Search, Apple's rules on steering in the App Store and the choice screen for Safari, and Meta's pay or consent model. The Commission suspects that the measures put in place by these gatekeepers fall short of effective compliance of their obligations under the DMA. In addition, the Commission has launched investigatory steps relating to Apple's new fee structure for alternative app stores and Amazon's ranking practices on its marketplace. Finally, the Commission has ordered gatekeepers to retain certain documents to monitor the effective implementation and compliance with their obligations. So, I don't know. So, okay, someone please correct me here in the live chat. There's been a general feeling that major, huge tech companies are evolving and adapting faster than laws and regulations can really kind of rein them in on certain business practices. I feel this is a widespread issue that is not related to any one specific major tech corporation. And as the DMA has been put into effect, it seems to me, I have feelings on this, it seems to me that a lot of companies are maliciously complying. Apple is trying to find interpretations of the DMA where it feels it is relating to the exact letter of the law in a way that still punitively harms competition, still is sort of anti-competitive for their own customers, and actually works against what the spirit of the DMA should represent. So This isn't the same thing as like the lawsuit from the DOJ. This is the first step. European Commission is saying we need to start investigating these companies. We also need to see their records, and we also need to see how they are building these new services and adapting to these new regulations to see, are they actively trying to work within the bounds of these new limitations, or are they trying to find ways of subverting these new regulations? I haven't been particularly happy with Google search and with YouTube. I haven't been particularly happy with all of the various meta brands, especially like Facebook and Instagram and Threads. I've obviously been very displeased with how Apple has managed the sort of modern era of mobility for their own products and especially for their own customers. But then that, of course, bleeds over into the rest of the market too. And that even a company like Amazon is getting some kind of token reference to investigations coming their way as to how their business model operates. I think Amazon is a really telling, excuse me, sorry, that one surprised me. I think Amazon is a really telling company to include in this list. Amazon is one of the companies that I have the most anxiety over in how they try to blur the lines between the different solutions that they offer and how Amazon is able to communicate across all of those solutions in ways that other businesses working with Amazon are not given the same access. So let's say you make an incredible camera widget, right? And you put this up in your store, and your store is embedded into Amazon sales. Amazon gets granular data on all of your customers. And after a point, Amazon can say, hey, you know what? If we make a similar widget and we label it an Amazon Basics tool, we've got all of this company's customer data. We've got all of their access to all of their purchasing and spending habits. We can obliterate a tiny brand with marketing and preferential placement in the Amazon store and in search results. And we don't really have laws currently that adequately account for that kind of market verticality. I'm using big words and I'm not entirely sure I'm using them all correct. That to me is one of the most harmful aspects of a platform. YouTube is tied in with Google search and Google advertising and Google analytics, and it's all this one big black box vertical. And now they're getting into things like, well, you know, when you publish this video, don't you want to attach products for people to buy directly? And Google manages that relationship with resellers, but that has a distinctly harmful effect on things like affiliate links. So if you were using Amazon affiliate links, well, I mean, yeah, someone might look in the description. But how have we seen YouTube handle video descriptions? They've now been so minimized that under the video, what YouTube wants to see are direct links to products that they get a cut of the commission for you to go and shop and buy. That is YouTube and Google abusing its market position as being the gatekeeper for YouTube and preventing you from competing as adequately. I can't put in a B&H affiliate link that pops up as a clickable tile under my YouTube video, but I can send you to Walmart? Is that where you want to buy tech? I would prefer you buy tech through B&H. Even above like Amazon, I would prefer you go to Adorama. I would prefer you buy mics and audio equipment from Sweetwater. But if I use those affiliate codes and those affiliate links, they're buried in my video description. And I know for a fact people are not going through video descriptions to find content and to find data on these products that we're talking about. So if I link a product, maybe it might also send you to Newegg. Like that's fine. But for very specific things like camera gear, audio gear, recording, content creation, stuff like that, I'm not going to send you to Newegg. Newegg's marketplace is awful. Amazon's marketplace is awful. I want to send you directly to a site where not only are you going to have a streamlined shopping experience, getting exactly the product that you want, not some gray label kind of knockoff of it, but then also, if there's an issue with that order, I know a lot of the people No, not a lot of the. I know a lot of people who have worked for B&H, who have worked for Adorama, who have worked for Sammy's Cameras, who have worked at, a buddy of mine is still at Sweetwater. We were marching band nerds together. Like we still regularly just like, hey man, what's going on? I don't know. Have you seen this new mic? I know that's crazy. Okay, well I'll chat again in 6 months. Bye. Later, Mike. It's that's where I would prefer you go and spend your money. I think you will pay a little bit more than the absolute barest bottom price that you can find on a marketplace seller at Amazon or at Newegg, but I think you have so much more potential for a better overall shopping experience. But that requires cracking through this numbing consumer idea of shopping and scalability and convenience. And I don't really think anything's any more convenient. As an example, we're scaling back on Amazon. So we're now starting to just get into the habit of only buying on Amazon when we really have enough stuff to qualify for free shipping, right? We still have a couple months left on our Prime, but we're not going to renew Prime. We're done with Prime. There's no benefit for us to keep up with this, and we find that we're just buying things to buy things. It's going to be better for us when we're off Prime. So we're already acting like we're off Prime. My wife had this order. It was almost ready to go. We just needed we needed a little extra cash. So I got these new, I can't even remember who makes them. That's terrible of me. Yeah, there's like no label on the little attachment. So I've just been wanting these for a while, and now I can't remember the name of the company. It's like Pyrotech, something like that. That's not what it is. But they're just these little adapters for your camera strap, right? These little ball adapters, and it has a little clip, and you stick it on the clip, and it snaps into place, and, you know, it's great. I have more cameras than camera straps. And it's silly, like one of the things that will determine if I leave the house with a camera is which camera has my camera strap attached to it. I could buy more camera straps, but I don't wanna. I want quick release settings so I can throw a camera up on a tripod and not have the strap dangling. I'm persnickety that way. So, okay, my wife has this order. It's almost ready to go. These things are like 25 bucks. I'm like, okay, let's just put these on there. And that'll push you over to what we would have for free shipping, and we'll do that. So she puts it on the order. We put in the order. It's like, okay, yeah, these are in stock. They're going to be overnighted to you. Cool. That's Amazon Prime. What a great shopping experience. Then they're delayed. Then they're delayed another day. Then we get a message from Amazon. Oh, yeah, we had some trouble fulfilling this. It's actually going to be supplied at this time. They were marked in stock on Amazon Prime. It took 5 days to ship them out. So why wouldn't I have just bought them from B&H? Like if I bought them from B&H, and again, maybe I put together another order and I need another memory card for another one of my cameras, like I could have put all that together and qualified for free shipping on B&H, and they only would have been shipped 3-day, but they would have gotten to me faster than Amazon overnight, which ended up turning into 5 days. The experience on Amazon has completely enpoopified, if we're using Cory Doctorow descriptions of how services sort of age over time. Just as one little example there. So, the verticality of Amazon is problematic. They give themselves advantages that none of their other customers get, and they are their own customer and competitors to all of the other partners that work on their platform. And this is the kind of deep-rooted technology issue that we need to untangle. And our laws are kind of inadequate. We need to build legal precedent to then shape the next generation of laws, of legal frameworks that help us understand the relationship between a big tech company and the consumer. Right now, we're trying to use like the Sherman Antitrust Act to adapt it to work in the 21st century to then make some kind of parallel between Apple and, you know, the Bells, you know, AT&T from, you know, when we broke up the phone network and allowed for competition to kind of come in through that. Obviously, it's not the same. So we've needed some kind of challenge that helps us adapt what's happening here. I would say the EU is probably 2 years ahead of us. Just the fact that they have this attempt, this DMA, the Digital Markets Act, is not the conclusion. This isn't where regulations stop. Oh, well, we have the DMA and that's now the law and that's what's going to happen. Now we need to see how the DMA is wielded. We need to see how court cases are built on top of this law. We need to see how parts of the law are challenged by corporations like Apple and Google and Amazon and Facebook. And this is where our laws get refined. This is the same problem I've always had with the conversation around net neutrality. I know I can soapbox on net neutrality. I'm going to keep this brief. People will make witty, pithy comments like, how can you regulate the internet with a law that was originally made to regulate telegraphs and telephones from the early 1900s? And that's not what we have. What we have is almost a century of legal precedent and adaptations and changes to those laws over time. As we get into the late 90s and early aughts, we kind of took a hands-off approach to a lot of this legislation, and tech just steamrollered over a lot of what we took for granted in a lot of our legal precedent. And now we arrive at an era where, oh, we don't like a lot of the stuff that's going on, but, oh, well, what are you going to do? No, this is what we use laws and regulations to try and manage the relationship between corporations and people. And when we see significant challenges, that's how the next generation of our laws arrive, or at least the next generation of adaptations to the current laws that we have on the books. So, just again, kind of interesting as we kind of look at some of this is very, very brief. But there is a PDF that I hope people will also download, or at least read through some of this. Alphabet and Apple steering rules. The Commission has opened proceedings to assess whether the measures implemented by Alphabet and Apple in relation to their obligations pertaining to app stores are in breach of the DMA. Article 5, subparagraph 4 of the DMA requires gatekeepers to allow app developers to steer consumers to offers outside the gatekeeper's app stores free of charge. That's kind of an important point, because have we seen Apple empowering their customers to do business with services on the iPhone directly between that consumer and the service? Or are we hearing about how Apple is trying to force app developers to also self-audit and pay Apple for any apps that are installed outside of the App Store? So sure, you can sideload, and Apple thinks that is maliciously compliant. We're going to let people install apps on the iPhone outside of the App Store. And what are they doing with developers who are building those apps and services? They're saying, oh, but even if your consumers sideload, you still got to give us a cut. And you need to be responsible for all of the metrics and accounting and analytics, so that we know how much you should be giving us just to let people sideload apps on the iPhone. I don't believe that's in keeping with the spirit of the DMA. I feel like that's Apple trying to get away with something and generally making the situation worse for their own customers and for the market at large. So it's pretty gross. Oh, Bionic Scoop. Yeah, I'm sorry. I kind of skipped over that. This is a huge issue in my line of work with Amazon. I have a friend. Sorry, this is complicated. I don't need to explain all this. A friend of a coworker's husband has a business that used to operate solely as its own entity, and a long time ago, not a long time ago, I mean, not like 50 years ago, but I mean, a while ago, they started finding some success being an Amazon marketplace seller. And then Amazon started requiring all of these granular metrics and all of this incredibly detailed data on their business. And wouldn't you know it, recently Amazon has started offering some similar products and services to what this little company is doing. But now that little company is so dependent on Amazon logistics and product order fulfillment that they can't easily separate themselves from Amazon. So they're getting squeezed. They're getting squeezed real bad. And Amazon has continuously changed like the rules on how things happen. So if Amazon is responsible for product fulfillment, that's money going in one direction. Then if the customer has an issue, the company is responsible for all of the extra consumer support and replacements and all of the other like return request RMAs, things like that. So it's like money goes in one direction and Amazon makes all this profit, but then all of the responsibilities for fielding the consumer relationship come back to the company. So it seems like a lopsided arrangement, but what are you going to do? Are you going to stop using Amazon? Well, it's fine if you want to take your chances, but Amazon's ready to completely rip off their business model. And you would think if there were good partitions and silos where parts of Amazon couldn't interact with each other, that we wouldn't see that as such an accessible trend. But Amazon seems to make a lot of money that way. And for whatever reason, we think, oh, well, if Amazon's successful, that must be good for the economy. But that's not the economy. That's just Jeff Bezos getting richer so he can try and build more rockets, I guess, is a thing. I'm gonna drink some coffee here. Yeah, Michael Corcoran, and again, it's however much we want to rely on these platforms now. Michael says, I decided finally I'm canceling Prime yesterday. I was expecting a package of medical supplies Sunday. It was just 30 minutes away, and I got a notification saying Thursday night. And that's I mean, I don't want to, yeah, that was just like me with my wacky camera adapters. But it's the same thing. We put in the order specifically because we saw Amazon said they could fulfill this. I actually kind of needed these things. This would have been something that would have gone with me to San Diego as like a backup. Like I might have considered just taking a little mirrorless camera with me because it's kind of a big deal. It was my first time going to San Diego, and I didn't want to have to mess with camera straps and tripods and stuff like that. So this would have been great. Didn't show up in time. Didn't show up until I had already gotten back from San Diego. So I'm not encouraged by Amazon's current order fulfillment promises when they don't seem to hold true, and I'm paying them for the promise of this service. The other one that I want to break into on this DMA press release, Meta's pay or consent model. This is one I wasn't as familiar with. Finally, the Commission has opened proceedings against Meta to investigate whether the recently introduced pay or consent model for users in the EU complies with Article 5, Paragraph 2 of the DMA, which requires gatekeepers to obtain consent from users when they intend to combine or cross-use their personal data across different core platform services. The Commission is concerned that the binary choice imposed by Meta's pay or consent model may not provide a real alternative in case users do not consent, thereby not achieving the objective of preventing the accumulation of personal data by gatekeepers. So then an important part of this is next steps. The Commission intends to conclude the proceedings opened today within 12 months. If warranted following the investigation, the Commission will inform the concerned gatekeepers of its preliminary findings and explain the measures it is considering taking or the gatekeeper should take in order to effectively address the Commission's concerns. In case of an infringement, the Commission can impose fines up to 10% of the company's total worldwide turnover. Such fines can go up to 20% in case of repeated infringement. Moreover, in case of systematic infringements, the Commission may also adopt additional remedies such as obliging a gatekeeper to sell a business or parts of it, or banning the gatekeeper from acquisitions of additional services relating to the systemic non-compliance. This is the first time I think we've seen this kind of direct language in a regulatory action. 10% of Apple's worldwide turnover would be a lot more for Apple to absorb into a quarterly financial statement. 20% of Amazon's worldwide turnover would make some of these behaviors a lot less attractive. This is the core idea, and why I love that the EU is kind of blanket investigating all of our big tech companies at once. It's going to take a year. It's going to take a year for the commission to go through all of this data and to arrive at some kind of conclusion on what they feel has been an overstep by these companies. But it's not just an action against Google. It's not just an action against Facebook. We are seeing broad investigations happening at a very high level across almost the entire tech industry. And this should be encouraging to some folks out there. I was a big fan of Elizabeth Warren. I really feel a lot of these tech companies should probably start having pieces broken off of them. Again, if Amazon can't properly silo an advertising business from a product selling business, from a search business, from an order fulfillment business, and it always seems to be that Amazon can combine all of these services and make way more money than their competitors, we have a problem there. We need to investigate the ramifications of that problem, and we need to address what is a systemic issue. So here, it would be undesirable to give up 10% of your company's total worldwide turnover on a business practice like this. If Apple has found like, oh, hey, what you're doing with the iPhone is really scummy, and making app developers pay to let people sideload your apps is kind of scummy, we're going to find you $1 billion. Apple's going to eat that in literally 5 days. 5 days of revenue from Apple is enough to overcome an action so specific and targeted and a fine of like $1 billion. It is not justice, because that is barely a tax on the business practice, and they're going to make so much more money by doing that thing that they can absorb the occasional losses of having to pay a fine here or there. It's not going to change the business practice. Right now, we need to make these actions so punitive and so brutal that companies are reluctant to engage in practices that might draw this kind of scrutiny. And if they don't want to draw this kind of scrutiny, maybe it's in their interest not to collect this kind of or this quantity of data on their users. They were making so much money over here. Well, now if we're going to make less, or if we're going to be fined even more, maybe we don't need to be just constantly brokering all of the data on our users. Now that this has come down from the DMA, I'm really hoping like a next step will be something like going after the automobile industry for selling off all of our driving data to insurance companies. This would be a nice next step in saying, like, how do we affect change in business practices that we all kind of agree are undesirable? That means we can't sit here and say, oh, I'm really glad Apple is going to get tagged here, but don't touch my Android phone. I'm really glad that Microsoft is going to face scrutiny on their AI practices, but don't go after my AI bot in WhatsApp. You know, like you can't just play for your team or for your side. What we hope to see is a regulatory action that broadly impacts all of these massive corporations and dissuades other companies from thinking, oh, that's a business we want to get into also. And if we can start getting a few wins, or at least just enough of a chilling behavior on how this stuff is going down, we'll all be happier with the services that come out of this. We'll all see more competition and get better services than this sort of entrenched feeling of everything being kind of stale. And like, oh, I guess we're peak smartphone. I guess there's nothing else we can do. Oh, if only these services worked like they used to work. Think about how terrible a lot of our assistance and mapping and search results have gotten. We're on a really terrible downswing right now. I don't know about y'all, but like I am actively bouncing around different search engines just so I can get more meaningful responses for very specific queries that I'm trying to get answers to. I, why are we doing that? Why should we just be shrugging that off? Why are we sort of acquiescing to this notion of, well, but they're going to do what they're going to do? I mean, you can't tell Google how to run their business. Like, actually, yeah, I can. What? So, it's messy stuff, and it's going to take. This is going to take a year to untangle, but we are right at the beginning of it. And so, if we're paying attention to how this goes down, and we acknowledge that we've been in a pendulum swing. I think there have been times in our world history where governments and legal actions have been crushing to innovation. I think we can absolutely point to times where governments have overreached. I don't believe we're in that time now. I believe we're in a time now where companies have been able to run roughshod over what little regulatory protection consumers have, and now we need to pull that pendulum back. In my lifetime, there will be a time where these regulators overstep. And as consumers and as citizens of all these different countries, these nations in the world, we will have to make our voices heard. When they overstep, we got to loosen this back up again. But acknowledging that means we also need to acknowledge when the companies are way out there. And we need to bring back some of the reasonable protections consumers should be able to expect. It's always going to swing back and forth. And it might swing wildly, especially in an era of tech where advancements happen so quickly. Things get out of our control, things get out of hand. Now is our time to kind of rein in some of this and just point to it and say, your users aren't happy, but they have nowhere else to go. So it's time someone steps in to manage what's going on. And that's what's going to transition us over into talking about the DOJ. And how dare they? How dare they even try and tell Apple what to do? Oh, Dr. Claw 77, perhaps this is the beginning of impoopification, way too much drop shipping going on at Amazon. I think Amazon is well down that path of impoopification. Because again, it's not just whether it's bad for company and customer, it's bad for everybody except Amazon and their shareholders. So again, it's like I usually point to YouTube as my primary example. You go to YouTube, you've got a free, I don't pay for YouTube Premium or Plus or whatever. I go to YouTube and I get ads. Almost never have I clicked on someone's video to watch, like my buddy Jeff, El Jefe Reviews. Audio channel, I'm formerly some audio guy. I also cut my own Bluetooth earbud and speaker and headphone reviews. And I'm going to a headphone-centric channel. Are there no companies advertising on YouTube audio products? I cannot remember a time where I've clicked on one of Jeff's videos and I've gotten an ad that was relevant to our shared mutual appreciation for AudioKit. I think one of the only times and again, I'm really trying to remember because it's gotten to the point where I click on one of Jeff's videos, I wait for the little countdown, I say skip ad, and then I watch his video. So I'm not actively paying attention. But if something stuck out, that would be novel. That would be something that I would remember. One of the few was a commercial someone cut for Raycon, which I think both Jeff and I would be fine saying, meh, not our bag. If you like your Raycons, I'm not besmirching them. I'm just saying Jeff and I have very particular tastes, and I turn to him to help inform the quality of listening that I don't always appreciate. And I would hope that he kind of looks at some of my commentary going like, yeah, I don't agree with him, but he definitely is coming at this from a different perspective than what I appreciate. And between the two of us, I think you get a really great idea of what audio products can accomplish. We're not at odds with each other. I feel like we're puzzle pieces. We complement each other. Or at least I try to imagine, like, what would Jeff say about these? Okay, I'm usually right, but every now and then he surprises me. Anyway, that tangent. So I usually point to YouTube as this problem where Google has every byte of behavioral data on me, and yet can't seem to serve me ads that are relevant to my interests. It is almost wildly off the pulse, or actively agitating and aggressive. Like during a political campaign, my YouTube feed is filled with conservative advertisements. I got so many Trump advertisements during the last presidential election. I basically stopped going to YouTube. If I'm on Instagram for more than 5 minutes, at some point in that Instagram feed, there is one product ad that will scan by my field of view that makes me stop for just a second. And I hate so much that it works. But for example, like, same thing happened to my wife. She's now using these new sleep headphones. It's like a headband with these like sort of soft headphone drivers that kind of just line up with your ears. She did not buy the headphones that she saw advertised on Instagram, but that crossed her Instagram feed and it got her interested enough to look at the product segment and to eventually buy something. Instagram didn't get the credit for that sale. The person advertising on Instagram didn't get the credit for that sale, but Instagram was spot on with a product recommendation for my wife. Instagram is regularly spot on with like weird little repair tools, like flashlights and magnets and like a rollable PC repair part kit. And like all of these things are like, I have stopped to investigate whether or not that's something I want to buy. That has never happened on YouTube. So YouTube is using ads as a pain point to try and get me to remove ads by paying YouTube more money. If you were a company advertising products and services on YouTube, why would you do business with YouTube? If your ads are going to be sort of mistargeted to consumers that really have no interest in your product or service, and your ads are basically just becoming pain points to convince the users on YouTube to pay for YouTube Premium. And then look, mention YouTube Premium on Threads. Oh man, it is the best purchase I've ever made. This is the best subscription. Oh my gosh, getting rid of ads and getting perks like getting to listen to just the audio or video downloads. And you're like, you're paying a lot for stuff that should be basic and free. Okay, cool. But, you know, if I wanted to support a content creator and advertising was more relevant, then those advertisers would be spending more, and each of those video views would probably get me hooked into maybe checking out a product or a service, and then the content creator that was stitched together with that ad would probably make more money. But that's not YouTube's bag. YouTube wants to make this platform painful until I pay them enough money to make it kind of like how it used to be. It's like the airline industry. All of these different tiers for like pre-boarding and stuff. No. Every year, the airline industry takes more away so that you pay more just to get the service you used to have. And that's what YouTube's business model seems to have become. And I'm not really stoked about that. Malik, the EU is attacking with a crowbar, as the US seems to be using a pillow. You're not wrong. Michael Corcoran, my favorite is when someone says, quote, you use an Android phone and you're worried about privacy? It's like if one injustice, data exploitation, exists, you can never complain about any other injustices. Honestly, I can never think of a moment in U.S. history where where regulators were too powerful because of the campaign finance laws. They've always been neutered here. I don't, I'm not legally educated enough to comment on that. I do believe pendulum swinging is something that we need to watch. And I often reference this too in terms of things like unions. Union power is something that can be wielded with effective improvements for workers. Union power in our nation's history has sometimes been exploited. We want to be vigilant. We don't want to be complacent and just say this good, this bad in perpetuity. And we need to acknowledge when changes in power dynamics affect people and how they affect people and how we can improve the situations for people and for businesses if we're going to have a functioning economy. Right now, I am just speaking to the fact that we need more union power and we need better regulatory agency over these products and services. And at some point, we'll probably need to re-examine that relationship and refine how our tactics are employed against businesses. That is not the time, though. The time is the opposite right now. All right, so the other major aspect here, the other major topic, and again, like I was saying, this got posted last week, and suddenly everyone and their mother and their mother's uncle's aunt was a learned legal scholar. I am not a legal scholar. I take a perverse glee in following regulatory action in the telecommunication space. I love digging through FCC briefs. I cannot tell you how many people I've sent the FTC report over. The FTC did that incredible research study on how much data your ISP tracks on you and sells off to other brokers. I just love digging into the meat and potatoes, the nuts and bolts of how this part of our economy sort of pretends to function, and then you peel back one layer of it and you're like, oh no, it's not what we thought it was at all. And that seems to be kind of the only way that we get this, is not people editorializing on the legal action, the lawsuit, or the study. Instead, it's just going directly to the study. So what I have here in front of us is the PDF filed March 21st, 2024. The United States of America, the state of New Jersey, Arizona, California, D.C., District of Columbia, Connecticut, Maine, Michigan, Minnesota, New Hampshire, New York, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Oregon, Tennessee, Vermont, and Wisconsin. These are all of the plaintiffs against Apple. And now I want to read just the beginning part of this complaint. And I'm sorry that I know this isn't the best podcasting where I'm just reading off something at you, because I genuinely want you to go and just get this document. This document is publicly available. This is how our government works. You can get really frustrated with nerds like me who talk about politics. But if you don't get active in politics, then people will make decisions for you. And they will often make decisions you don't want them to make for you. If you don't participate, you really don't have any right to complain. Everything is politics. Every purchasing decision you make, every advertisement you consume, every speech that you see, every vote that you cast, everything you do ties into the community aspect of being a citizen in a country where you live. And it's better to be informed and to be a part of it than to be sitting in the backseat where someone else takes you for a ride. I want you to listen to the language of this complaint, because it's not difficult. It's not hard to hear what they're saying and to understand and appreciate what's about to happen in our courts. This is really accessible, and you don't need someone to explain it for you or to break it down for you. I am not clever enough to give you legal insight on this complaint. I can literally read this complaint to you, and I think you're going to get a good sense of what's going on here. So, let me screen share this back again. In 2010, a top Apple executive emailed Apple's then CEO about an ad for the new Kindle e-reader. The ad began with a woman who was using her iPhone to buy and read books on the Kindle app. She then switches to an Android smartphone and continues to read her books using the same Kindle app. The executive wrote to Jobs, One, quote, "Message that can't be missed is that it is easy to switch from iPhone to Android, not fun to watch," end quote. Jobs was clear in his response. Apple would force developers to use its payment system to lock in both developers and users on its platform. Over many years, Apple has repeatedly responded to competitive threats like this one by making it harder or more expensive for its users and developers to leave than by making it more attractive for them to stay. For many years, Apple has built a dominant iPhone platform and ecosystem that has driven the company's astronomical valuation. At the same time, it has long understood that disruptive technologies and innovative apps, products, and services threatened that dominance by making users less reliant on the iPhone or making it easier to switch to a non-Apple smartphone. Rather than respond to competitive threats by offering lower smartphone prices to consumers or better monetization for developers, Apple would meet competitive threats by imposing a series of shape-shifting rules and restrictions in its App Store guidelines and developer agreements that would allow Apple to extract higher fees, thwart innovation, offer a less secure or degraded user experience, and throttle competitive alternatives. But it has deployed this playbook across many technologies, products, and services, including super apps, text messaging, smartwatches, and digital wallets, among many others. Apple's conduct also stifles new paradigms that threaten Apple's smartphone dominance, including the cloud, which could make it easier for users to enjoy high-end functionality on a lower-priced smartphone, or make users device agnostic altogether. As one Apple manager recently observed, quote, "Imagine buying an, expletive deleted, Android for $25 at a garage sale and it works fine, and you have a solid cloud computing device. Imagine how many cases like that there are," end quote. Simply put, Apple feared the disintermediation of its iPhone platform and undertook a course of conduct that locked in users and developers while protecting its profits. So, what we have here is an 88-page brief. This is the initial complaint. This is the filing of the lawsuit. This is the beginning of the action. When you see on like a Mac-focused website, Walt Mossberg says that this case is laughable. This isn't the case. They haven't made their case. That's what the courtroom is for. Walt Mossberg saying, "Oh, they're just mad that Apple's successful." No. We're not even mad that Apple represents a monopoly over the iOS business of smartphones, or that this is now becoming an anti-consumer landscape in North America. We're upset at how Apple has recently become astronomically profitable. We're upset at anti-consumer business practices that affect competition. So this is, if you read through that, that just sounds like kind of a decently written editorial on how part of the smartphone business has been maintained over the last 15 years. That's what I'm talking about. You don't need someone to spell out for you the pros and cons of an argument in a legal brief like this. You can just go read it yourself, and it's kind of a fascinating look at our government's relationship with Apple, our lawmakers' relationship with Apple, our media and reviewers' relationship with Apple, and now we've gotten to a point where one of the only agencies that can kind of mount any behavior-changing defense against some of Apple's business practices is the Department of Justice. We really shouldn't have let it get this far. We should have had other regulators in this space who maybe would have said things like, hey, we're the FCC, and we're responsible for telecommunications management here in the United States. AT&T, Sprint, Verizon, T-Mobile, We don't think it's a great idea if you let one phone manufacturer make a secondary de facto standard for carrier messaging, which is locked entirely to that one piece of hardware. We should have had some kind of pushback on saying, like, the nation operates with these cell phone towers, and a primary method of communicating between people through the towers is this standard called SMS. If Apple wants to make a data only platform, they can do what BlackBerry did. Great. We've already got a platform for that. But making it so that an iOS user can't as easily communicate with a non-iOS user on a significantly publicly funded infrastructure like cell phone towers, we don't think that's a good idea. Instead, we've been so sort of pro-business and rah-rah Apple that we've kind of just let them define their payments, their marketing, their communications standards, and how they take other standards, break interoperability, and then repackage that as a proprietary solution, which makes other competitors look like they put out inferior products, when really it's Apple that has, in this brief, degraded the user experience and the security of their own products. And the first people hurt are Apple's customers. The first people hurt, or who have concerns about privacy, their communications are less private because of Apple. So this is the beginning of that conversation. This is the beginning of that discussion. Now, all of these points in this 88-page document are going to be delivered in court. They're going to be argued between different teams of lawyers. We know Apple has some of the best lawyers on the planet, so we know this is going to be a pretty brutal fight. And the DOJ really does like to plan out over time a series and succession of arguments, and this is broad. There's a lot of moving parts here in both hardware sales, services sales, developer relations, customer relations, and how Apple operates within an environment which may or may not be competitive because of Apple's own actions. That's when the evidence is delivered, and that's when the disclosures are made, and that's when, documents are dredged up. Just like we saw with the Epic case, I don't believe Apple is operating in good faith for their customers. iMessage stood as a pain point to manage how Apple customers would interact with cheaper phones on the market. It made it more painful for parents to communicate with their kids unless everybody was on iOS devices. We just recently saw the admission, like, oh, Apple was seriously looking at how to bring Apple Watch to Android. And they worked on it for like 3 whole years, which is patently dumb. If Apple couldn't figure out how to interact with Google's notification framework in Android and bring that experience of Apple Watch to Android, they're just not good engineers. They're just not good software developers. I believe it was more a process of, you had teams at Apple that were working on this, but a bunch of executives said, nah, it's just better for us if everything's kind of locked up into this one vertical silo. Investigate, do the work, see how it all plays out, but we're not earnestly going to sell Apple Watch to Android users, even though you would have had an incredible market of Android users who would have bought that watch. So Diago, this is an interesting comment. Let's pull this up. I disagree with you on SMS web messaging. If Apple hadn't become dominant, Google wouldn't have to step in, because carriers for whom SMS was developed didn't want to spend money and created a better messaging system, RCS. So Diago, what I'm going to recommend is you read up on the history of RCS, because it's not a Google invention. RCS is another communications platform that has gone through a standards body. And it, in different parts of RCS, have been managed and are taken care of by different entities and a collection of companies around the world. It's a little like Bluetooth. There's the Bluetooth Special Interests Group. That is thousands of companies that all work on and contribute to Bluetooth as a standard, because they know it's better if we have all of this together and we all get to benefit from it. And we're not creating competing short form wireless standards. So when we try to oversimplify the history of SMS to RCS, it doesn't fully capture the nuance or the destructiveness of what Apple has done here in the United States specifically. I'm not speaking internationally. Here in the United States specifically, with how carriers had a relationship with consumers. And here in the United States, we radically subsidized SMS messaging to make our cell phone plans more attractive. In other countries, they didn't subsidize SMS. So here we relied on the core SMS technology. In Canada, home of research in motion, home to the BlackBerry, we saw how exciting that was when they shifted away from an SMS-based relationship to a more secure, data-driven experience. So while carriers here were working with the standards groups on what RCS should resemble, we saw Apple come in with a paired SMS iMessage, which brought in, again, Apple didn't invent this. This I'm crediting to BlackBerry. Apple brought a lot of what made BlackBerry messaging so addictive and so siloed and so contained, and stapled it directly to their main SMS tool as well, which again, on the iPhone, you have no competition. You can't choose another messaging app that also then handles your carrier-related communications, your SMS communications. And then Apple took a back seat in watching RCS play out in this huge fight between carriers who yet again did not want Google to define a standard, got in the way of Google trying to do work in that area, said they would do it themselves, realized it was going to be hard, and then eventually gave up and let Google do it. See also Google Wallet. For years, Apple Pay went unchallenged because Google was fighting carriers who did not want Google to be in charge of payments, and they tried to make ISIS, and then that fell apart, and they went, okay, fine, go ahead and make Android Pay or Google Pay or whatever you're going to call it, after all the damage had been done. For some reason, we allow Apple to define a certain aspect of that protocol for their users, and they're not challenged on it. And then we fight everyone else who might be trying to work in that space. And then we eventually arrive at a solution where, like, oh, if Google wants to pay for it, fine, let Google pay for it. And that's not competition. That's a duopoly of services and a very mismanaged market, which regulators should have stepped into earlier than what we currently see. But as it pertains to RCS, it is not as simple as saying, oh, if Apple hadn't made iMessage, then Google never would have made RCS. If BlackBerry had never made their own BlackBerry messaging protocol, we never would have gotten iMessage. And if RCS hadn't stagnated under this sort of conflict between carriers, ISPs, and standards bodies, then we never would have arrived at Google Messages the way that we had today. It is a very messy and complicated route that we get to the current messaging infrastructure that we have right now. Kapakash, the Apple Watch thing is BS. Android is open source. How can you not make it work? I'm really trying. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong here. One of the complaints that is detailed in this 88-page brief are things like smartwatches. Is there no open protocol for a watch developer to not only include notifications, but also rich notification replies on the Apple Watch? It's something we're losing in Android land, and I'm very upset about it. But there is a notifications protocol that we use on Android, and we've seen it employed in older builds of Android. We had the Qualcomm Talk, we had the Pebble. You get a notification on your wrist, you push a button, you have speech to text, you can send a direct reply, not a canned reply. And it seems like outside of Wear OS now, there isn't anything left that utilizes that older notification protocol. I worry that I think starting with Android 13, we've changed some of the privacy and security and app siloing, how data is managed on device, and how you send something from a watch to a phone seems to have gotten interrupted. I can't think of anything outside of Wear OS now that includes rich notification replies. But I have to ask, because I mean, I have an Apple Watch. I really haven't used an iPhone seriously since the iPhone SE 2020. Is there no other product accessory that can work with an iPhone to not just get a notification but also reply to it? Is it only the Apple Watch that allows for that kind of functionality? So Michael Peppertech is saying if they would have made the Apple Watch work as well with Android as they do with iPhones, they would have had to make iMessage work better at that time too. I think that's what they saw already. Because the Apple Watch has Apple-specific services, they would have had to bring all those services to the competing devices to not break them on the watch. I wish that smartwatches would just work as their own thing like a tablet or laptop does, not relying on being connected through an app to a specific OEM's phone. So I appreciate what you're saying. I feel, again, I'm grossly oversimplifying a developer conversation that probably takes years in software engineering to play out to see if it's applicable. You get an Apple Watch and you make a companion app on Android. Once you have that pairing in the companion app, it's going to look at your phone and say, this has Google Messages, not iMessage. So when they reply to text messages, this is the pipe we're going to point that messaging to, and that's how it's going to interact with those services. The only reason you have to bring iMessage over is if you're trying to pull Android users into an iMessage environment, which that's, I think, why the Apple Watch broke down, why this compatibility broke down. Apple wants this singular idea of this hardware works with this software on this service. But I don't feel it's any enormous challenge to make an Apple Watch that looks at what's on the phone and says, yeah, those are the little applets that we're going to use. Just point services in that direction. The phone is telling me that the default mail app is Gmail. Cool. We know what to do with that. We have Gmail on the iPhone too. And it would have been a good Trojan horse for other things too, like Apple TV and Apple Music. Like right now, Apple is in services growth, not in hardware or software growth. So that would have been a great way to kind of link all this together and say, hey, you've got an Apple Watch LTE and you're using Apple Music to track your workouts. And hey, look at all the things that you're doing just on your Apple Watch. Hey, you could bring this over to an iPhone, guys. But, again, I don't feel... I agree with you that iMessage was a breaking point, but not in the way that you're phrasing it here. Because I feel like you could have brought Apple Watch over minus iMessage. And look at all of the things that don't work on a Galaxy Watch unless you pair them with a Galaxy phone. I think you could have arrived at a very easy relationship that is very similar to that too. The converse, it used to be like, look at all the things on Wear OS that don't work on an iPhone, but that's really not because Google didn't want to include additional functionality. It was more Apple is reducing the competitive ability to have other features on a smartwatch. Again, I'm sorry if someone has replied, is there any other thing that can do speech to text notification replies on an iPhone? And I don't know that there is. I don't know. I'm not saying there isn't. I'm saying I don't know that there is. But again, I don't even think this needed to be iMessage on Android. I think you could have released this product and people on Android would have known I'm not getting the iMessage experience, but I'm getting the rings and I'm getting Apple Health and Apple Fitness and I'm plugged into these other Apple services. And now I can kind of better, like I can do a workout with my friends and that's through an Apple Core Health Services platform, not, trying to bring them over to Android. I think all of that still would have been broadly interoperable. It's just that I feel Apple probably thinks that they'll make more money on keeping everyone entrenched in the same walled garden, not expanding on accessories that might work better with competing devices. Same thing. We almost never talk about what is it like. Has anyone in this chat tried pairing AirPods to an Android device. Is it any good experience? I genuinely haven't tried. I have never really thought about putting those two together in that way because they're not built to talk to each other that way. Michael Peppertech, that's not what I'm asking. Michael says, I can reply to any notifications on my Apple Watch, even if there isn't a watchOS app. That's not what I'm saying. Can you pair a Garmin to, this is what's so tough, is because like this is how bad the smartwatch market has become. Can you pair a Pebble to an iPhone and get speech to text notifications on your Pebble? I have the OnePlus watch. I get a notification and I can reply to that notification, and that goes to the phone, and then a message is sent off. If I switch to an Amazfit, to a Garmin, to a Xiaomi Health Band, to like a Fitbit, I don't have the ability to reply to a notification. I do not have a rich notification reply option. As far as I know now, only Wear OS supports the ability for me to send that reply. And you're right, just like the Apple Watch, I don't have to have an applet on the watch if I get an email. If I get an email through Outlook, actually, that's not a good example either because Outlook has a Wear OS app. But let's say I didn't have a Wear OS app for Outlook. There's an API that lets me talk out a reply, and then it goes to my phone, and my phone sends off the email. If I switch away from a Wear OS app, I lose that ability. And it's one of the few things that's keeping me on Wear OS is that ability to reply to a notification and send it off. Is there any other watch accessory, any other watch or pair of headphones? We used to have this ability on Bluetooth headphones. You could get a notification, reply to the notification, and it would send it off for you. Does anything else exist in Apple land that you can send a notification, send a reply from a notification except for the Apple Watch? Oh yeah, Michael Corcoran. So have you ever tried a full Android smartwatch? It's basically like a budget Android phone from 2018 around your wrist. They use their own SIM. They were big in China, but they're dying. So where they're actually really popular is on kids' watches. That's what my daughter has. So the TikTok 5 was just announced. She has the TikTok 4, and it is a mini Android-based smartphone on your wrist. And I really wish they made a grown-up version. It is shockingly good. She gets all-day battery life. It doesn't have heart rate tracking, but it has step tracking. So she loves, talking about her step count. Has little applets, has tons of communication, has a camera so she could video call if she's on Wi-Fi. We don't let that on LTE. They're dying for grown-ups, but that's sort of the tip of the spear for giving kids phones and smartphones now is actually a data-enabled smartwatch. So yeah, I'm very anxious to see what the TikTok 5 is going to do. Michael Peppertech, I think you're too deep in the weeds here. Then it would be if you want iMessage because it offers certain features different from Google Messages, you'd pair the watch with an iPhone. That makes total sense and would force better message app competition as well. I think I get what you're putting together, MPT. I'm not trying to pick on you. Again, it's difficult to kind of follow a thread of a conversation in message replies and stuff, but I think we've all overthought what does it mean if an Apple Watch connects to an Android, right? I think it's got to be simpler. This is a computer on my wrist. This is a computer in my pocket. The computer in my pocket is running software, and the computer on my wrist should know what's on the computer in my pocket. And then that's all I care about. If I don't want to use Google Maps and I want to use Here Maps instead, I can still get sort of relevant notifications from my phone back to my wrist computer for things like turn-by-turn directions, right? It's like, I think we've gotten just so vice grip on this is an Android that does Android phone things, and we've kind of lost the part of the conversation where we're just talking about computers. This is a computer, and I should have a little more control over how I want to use that computer and what that computer operates with. And right now, there's so much friction in between these different computers, and I want to alleviate some of that friction. In Android land, we don't have a ton of friction. If I go from a Samsung to a Pixel, a lot of stuff changes, but I'm generally plugged into a similar workflow. I think consumers appreciate that. Right now, it's the camps between Apple and Google that these massive tech corporations are entrenching their users and preventing them from a more fluid and seamless experience. And part of that is, why can't a watch talk to a competing platform? And instead of making this situation better and offering better solutions to iPhone fans, what do we see? We see Wear OS making it more difficult for iPhone users to try a Wear OS app. Now there's less interoperability. I mean, why? Why try to make this better for iPhone users if Apple is kind of making it one-sided in one direction as well? We'll do the same thing and maybe we'll make more money like Apple does. I think that's a bad way to be. I think that's not what we want. I think we want better, broader competition, and we want to see companies actually step up and say, we've got the best solution, you're going to try it, you're going to love it. And I think Apple Watch could have been that on Android. I think Apple Watch is one of those things where I can't help but praise how good Apple Watch was as a wrist computer. But we saw Apple say, no, we're going to make more money if we just kind of silo this off and wall it off and prevent people from using it. Hey, Ozzy Beach Bum. What's going on, sir? It's been a bit since we chatted last. From Skunky Neko, thank you. AirPods on an Android phone works, but there is no way to tell the battery percentage without a third-party app. You know, at some point I'm gonna have to try this because I bet you there's some AAC compatibility. I think Android handles AAC very poorly. This is not an Apple problem, this is an Android problem, but AAC compression rarely works well on an Android. I bet you the experience on AirPods is kind of crap. I'm sorry, the experience of AirPods on an Android is kind of crap. Oh, okay, and that's another thing. Yeah, I could probably expected that. I use my AirPods Max with my Android devices. The dumb part is no way to update them without an iPhone, iPad, or Mac. Yeah, that totally makes sense. For sure. Michael Corcoran, yeah, I own a very quirky Chinese full Android smartwatch called Ticris Max. It's a ridiculous product, 2.86-inch screen, running full Android 7.1. I love it. Man, I remember we started getting a bunch of those pitched to us at Pocket Now back in the day. God, I wanted to play with so many of them too. So anyway, okay. I want to wrap up this segment and then close out talking about Windows on ARM. So we've been talking about Apple and all these things. Everybody's got opinions. I believe, my preference, my bias. My opinion, my preference, my bias. I believe Apple has been overdue more regulatory scrutiny in their business practices. How they work with developers, I think, is a lopsided arrangement and is akin to bullying. And I believe Tim Cook perjured himself back in, I think it was 2021, when he testified under oath to a House Judiciary Committee that Apple does not bully their developers. At that time, I believe he was speaking an untruth. We've witnessed in many arenas, like, for example, right now, it's March of 2024. The products have been available since June of 2023. They've been ready to go. They're sitting in warehouses. The companies that make them have been communicating with people who pre-ordered that there's still no hope in sight for getting them, but Apple is still holding the Bluetooth tracker market hostage by refusing to update the iPhone, even though we've seen regulatory approvals on Bluetooth trackers, even though Androids are actually the better platforms for finding trackers in your vicinity. They're actually better at finding unwanted trackers than iPhones are. Apple is purposely making the iPhone worse for iPhone users concerned about privacy and security because they don't want to give up how profitable AirTags and their AirTag licensing has been for the company. They're making more money on making the product worse and holding competition hostage. If any of you want to, you can file a complaint with the FTC. I filed 2. I've also written letters to my local elected officials. I've also written letters to the DOJ. I hope that somewhere in a vast bucket of angry messages sent to the DOJ is this one little email from Juan at somegadgetguy.com saying, hey guys, this is crap. Apple is harming competition with this business practice, and we've been held hostage since June of last year. With all these promises, Apple still can't give us a runway on when this feature will be updated for the iPhone, and I'm sitting on pre-orders from Chipolo and Pebblebee waiting for a Bluetooth tracker to arrive for Android devices, and it still isn't here. Apple is using their ability to pressure the market and pressure the media and pressure reviewers and pressure developers so that they can give themselves an unfair advantage in the market. And now what we have to see is, can the DOJ make a case that this is akin to monopolistic business practices? Do the numbers bear this out? And will we, from this action, develop any better regulations for managing massive tech companies in this space? And that's messy, and it's going to get really ugly. And I think the first step in trying to sort of suss out how you feel about these types of markets and how you feel about this type of regulation is just to read it directly. The second you go to macfansite.net, pretty sure they're going to be against the DOJ. But that doesn't give you a better education on what's really happening. And like I just read from the intro to this complaint, it is very easy to follow the argument that they're making. Now we need to see, do they have the evidence to back that up in a court of law? And I think this is going to be fascinating. Whether or not the DOJ comes out victorious, Apple is going to have to disclose internal communications that I think are going to paint Apple in a very ugly light. Just like we saw after the Epic trial, just like we've seen from other EU regulatory actions. It's not so much that Apple just gets off scot-free, it's the market perception correction. It's okay to be a fan of Apple, it's okay to love their products, but let's not act like this is some magical unicorn company that has your best interests at heart while it's trying to become a $3 trillion market cap entity. That's not how you win in a capitalistic society. You got to do some really ugly things to get there. Ted, give me some bullet points on what to snitch on about regarding Apple. In my opinion, Apple got off really light with Batterygate. It's still, I think, one of the most reprehensible anti-consumer business practices the world has ever seen. But yeah, AirTags, absolutely one of them. We still don't know when the iPhone will be updated. And then read through this brief. You can also, I think one of the primary examples I give with developers isn't Apple versus Epic, but Apple versus WordPress. So WordPress updated their app. Apple refused the update. Well, okay, there's payment options in the WordPress app. We'll remove them. And Apple was like, no, you're not going to remove the payment options. You're going to keep them in there, but only through our payment platform so that you have to give us a cut. And Apple held the WordPress app hostage. We also saw something very similar. Like, I'm not a fan of Facebook, but during the peak of the pandemic, Facebook was not taking a cut on video events. So it's kind of a charitable act on Facebook's behalf. Let's say there was going to be an in-person event and you charged for it and that's how you made your money. Facebook offered a platform where you could do a video event and people would pay you directly and then Facebook wouldn't take a cut. But then people saw, hey, I donated $10 to this person to go, not donated, I paid $10 to go to this event. And then I hear from the person who ran the event that my donation was only $7. My payment was only $7. Facebook lied about taking a cut. Well, Facebook tried to tell people, no, if you paid for the event through your iPhone, Apple took a 30% cut of what you paid that host. But the second they did that, Apple halted updates on the Facebook app. So Apple held the Facebook app hostage to prevent them from telling consumers this is where your money really went. And then Apple used that as evidence against Facebook. Oh, look, Facebook is just stealing your data, and look at these ads, and look at how they're always taking a cut, blah, 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 blah. And then they came out with their own ad service after they kneecapped Facebook on the iPhone. It's point after point after point, and it looks really scummy unless you only read your news through applemacfanboy.net, who's always going to take kind of the targeted spin that, well, but Apple has to do this to protect their interests and be successful in capitalism, and don't we want a healthy Apple competition, blah, blah, blah. That's not really what the reality of this landscape looks like. These companies are doing some really dirty-ish. And it would be nice if we had some kind of regulatory agency that could push back more aggressively, but unfortunately it seems the first step is bypassing FCC, bypassing FTC, and eventually we end up at the DOJ as a broadsword to try and hack some of this stuff back. And I wish it wasn't that severe. I wish we could more nuanced work our way through some of these problems over time, but that's not what we have. That's not where we're at. Carl, that's a good place to wrap it, man. Hot take. Loving a company is not good for your mental health. I chose an iPhone 15 Pro because neither Samsung nor Android had what I needed. And that's the best way to be. This has nothing to do with an individual's use of a product on the ground floor. It has everything to do with how a massive tech conglomerate does business with a mass of consumers and what the government, their relationship with the government might resemble. So I just want to wrap this up shortly. We only had 3 main topics today, and I knew I would go long still on this podcast. But let me take another drink of water because I can already feel I'm getting kind of nasally again. Hold on one sec. So Michael Peppertech, I saw your comments, but I really got to move on, and I get into at least the last 20 minutes of a 2-hour podcast going to 2.5 hours. The other thing that I'm excited to talk about, because this is good for competition, is Snapdragon X Elite. The folks at Qualcomm were kind enough to sport me a train ticket and a hotel stay down to sunny San Diego to talk about a new chip coming to laptops and PCs, hopefully this summer. That's the rumors. We don't have any official confirmation from Qualcomm when these things might start shipping. But this was a critical baby step in discussing the future of Windows on ARM, ARM computing for consumer laptop machines, and what looks like it has the potential to be a very disruptive step for Windows in the same way that the new Macs were a very disruptive step for the MacBook Air, and the MacBook Pro. I am anxious because I feel Qualcomm has done what they need to do, but we don't have the same kind of hardware software vertical that Apple does. So in Apple land, if Apple comes out with a new chip, Apple software is going to be optimized for that chip, and the rest of the Apple hardware is going to be built around that chip. We get that. MacBook is actually one of the most exciting developments out of Apple we've seen over the last several years. In Windows land, Qualcomm is coming out with a chip. Microsoft has had the coziest relationship with Intel in years past, but they've had an exclusivity with Qualcomm through the previous Windows on ARM chips, like the Snapdragon 8CX, which is in my Robo Ancala. But there's not been as much Microsoft attention paid to Windows on ARM and emulation on these lower performance ARM chips. So just as we're seeing X Elite, Microsoft is at the tail end of their exclusivity agreement with Qualcomm. So we have to hope that Microsoft is looking at all of the emulation layers, all of the support, all of the updates, all of the libraries that need to work on ARM for a Qualcomm chip to be successful in the greater consumer marketplace. So the software side of this is a relationship between two companies. And then we need to take the chip that Qualcomm makes and build a whole computer around it, which is the purview of OEMs like Dell and HP and Lenovo and Asus and Acer and Toshiba's now Dynabook. And Microsoft is also a hardware OEM, which is different than Microsoft being a software provider. So what we got the chance to see was the real world testing that we've already gotten the benchmark graphs out from earlier in the year. So Qualcomm did an event and they showed off X Elite and they showed us all of these pretty bar graphs. And then they got a group of us tech nerds to go down to San Diego, and we got to see those benchmarks play out in real time on real machines. That is not functionally significantly more information than you already had. For me, it is the ability to confirm for you that I really saw this stuff work. I really got to handle these products, these reference devices, these test beds, and that I got just a little bit more firsthand experience in doing something like playing a game on a Windows on ARM machine. For me, the most exciting idea is what Qualcomm is showing off in that red shell reference design. So what I'm showing here on screen is my thumbnail from the event, but it's this red laptop that has been in all of our videos and all of our photos and in some of the Qualcomm press releases. This right here, all of their demos that they showed us were run on this reference system. This reference system is supposed to resemble a super ultra thin and light portable Windows laptop. What I hope Qualcomm can better explain is their chip's power use, power draw. That red laptop shell is a reference machine rated at 24 watts. When we talk about other processors, like an Intel processor or an AMD processor, we talk about the TDP and we describe it in watts, and we mean just the processor, not everything else in the system, the RAM, the storage, the screen, etc. So Qualcomm is treating this more like a phone. The entire laptop is a 24-watt reference design, which means the entire laptop operates at a lower peak power draw than just the chip in most Intel laptops. So it's an entire computer operating at less battery draw than just an Intel Core Ultra 7 series chip. So then that Intel also needs RAM and storage and a screen, and because all of those things are operating at even higher power draws, you're going to need fans. So what we have in X Elite is a fanless system, which is just slightly outpacing the power draw of a fancy tablet. But seeing the performance firsthand, arguably in a lot of benchmarking apps, we know Qualcomm is trying to make their chip look good. No arguments there. Lots of unanswered questions. Didn't get as much hands-on time to install software and try and run other services. Qualcomm didn't give us hands-on for that. But I got to play Control at over 30 frames per second on a system without a fan at 1080p, low quality settings, but pretty good sustained gameplay. That's not something my Steam Deck can do. And the Steam Deck has a fan and it peaks at a total system power draw around 20 watts. The APU, the little chip in the Steam Deck, has a max of 15 watts. And then you have a screen and a fan and RAM and storage, blah, 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 and all of that pulls power. And a Steam Deck is probably going to hit about 20 watts. So for 4 watts more power draw, I can game without a fan And I can game at a higher resolution on a larger screen, a brighter screen. This is very encouraging. And if anyone who's questioning, like, oh, well, they maybe had some special version of Control Canary build, it's not what you can download. You can run Control on any Windows on ARM device. Right now, on my 8CX, my Robo Ancala, this is a significantly less powerful chip than what's in X Elite. But I didn't do anything fancy. I didn't get a special ARM version of Control. I installed the Steam launcher, and I installed Control, and I played it on this, and it kind of peaks at around 8 frames a second. It's not good. But that means in one generation of chip, from the 8CX Gen 3 to the Snapdragon X Elite, the difference in ARM cores is delivering, and difference in ARM cores and in GPU performance is delivering a 400% improvement in Control using less electricity. I don't know any nerd who's really worth their nerd cred who would not be excited about a generational improvement of 400% at a power drop around 10%. I think, if I'm doing the math in my head on what the Robo Ancala draws versus what the Snapdragon X Elite reference design draws. Same thing. Battlefield at 30 frames per second. Not a ARM version of Battlefield, not an Android version of Battlefield, just straight, we installed the game just like you would install it on any other computer. So time and time again, we're looking at these sort of targeted thresholds. Qualcomm wants to hit this level of performance at this kind of power draw, and that to me gets really exciting. This won't win the massive workstation race under your desk, right? If you want the absolute most powerful system that you can build, you get a top-of-the-line chip and a top-of-the-line GPU and a 1200-watt power supply, and you pack all that into a giant steel frame chassis like I have under my desk right now with a Threadripper and a 4070. I might be able to edit and render in DaVinci Resolve at the end of the summer on a system drawing 40 watts and edit comparably, if not maybe faster, than what I can do on a Threadripper with a 4070 Ti. I don't know any nerd who's not anxious about that potential. That's pretty exciting to think that we could be right on the heels of that kind of shift in how we use Windows computers and Windows devices. If you've enjoyed picking up like a Lenovo Legion or an MSI or an Asus ROG handheld gaming system, a Steam Deck, why would we not be excited about a chip, an ARM-based chip in something like a Steam Deck, which is significantly more powerful than the APU in a Steam Deck at the same power draw? And we could maybe even go fanless, like, I think things like gaming on ARM has gotten a bad rap because you pick up a phone and you're like, oh, but it's just Android games are terrible and gotcha, and no, you just want to play Candy Crush. And then you forget that, like, a Nintendo Switch costs $300 and it's running a Tegra. What Tegra tablet would you pay $300 for? Oh, but it's not that. It's that the developers have optimized gameplay for what the Switch can deliver. Well, there you go. Except for the fact that now our ARM chips are an order of magnitude significantly crazy more powerful than what's in a Nintendo Switch. Like, don't even get me started on like Dimensity 9300 versus Tegra. It's just silly to even try and argue. We have so much untapped, unused compute power in our phones already. We could be demolishing mobile gaming. I desperately, desperately wish that we could just get sort of a Steam launcher for Android. And if devs wanted to, like, hey, we're going to make this game, we're going to port it, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and you want to run it on your phone, here you go. Alien Isolation. I can now hit 100 frames per second in Alien Isolation on a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. And it's sustained. It's not like I spike to 100 frames per second and then it crashes to 30. Oh, no, 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 no. You want a half hour, 45 minutes of solid gameplay in a decently built AAA title from a couple years ago? What portable system on battery power is giving you 100 frames per second in Alien Isolation? Tell me. I can't get 100 frames per second on a Steam Deck. That doesn't exist. I would like to know what else is doing that. If I have an MSI Creator laptop with a really hot RTX GPU in there, not on battery power. I'm definitely not getting over 60 frames per second on battery power in Alien Isolation. That's an older game. Shouldn't it be able to drive that game harder? You would think. So, we have to compartmentalize. I started out this podcast talking about some of the really pissy responses that I got from PC nerds. But it's like, man, we keep missing the forest for the trees. I have a lot of comments that are actually trying to be complimentary, like, oh, I guess this will be fine for a basic consumer thin and light. And you're like, yeah, but it's also outpacing Intel at near their high end. So why not just talk about it in terms of, hey, you could get an Intel Core Ultra 7 165H, and that'll probably outperform X Elite. I think we'd likely see 10% gains for Intel there. But that's also a chip that just the processor will probably draw like 45 watts. So why not have a whole computer that can occupy less? And that's also the other unknown. So the other reference design that Qualcomm has is an 80 watt reference design. And it's not 80 watts going to the chip. And this is where I'm so frustrated that Qualcomm has not better delineated the parts and pieces and all of the conversation surrounding these two different reference systems. So a 24 watt system probably has a certain amount of RAM with a certain kind of storage, certain screen resolution, brightness. A more expensive computer would probably have a higher resolution screen capable of higher brightness. So we know the screen probably draws more power. It probably has more RAM. We can assume that the RAM is drawing a little bit more power. Probably has different storage. Probably drawing a little bit more power. Has fans. Literally, even just turning on the fans changes the power curve and the performance per watt metric. So it might be that their 80 watt reference design just doubles the power to the chip. It's my assumption that X Elite can operate as low as like 15 watts. Maybe 10. I don't know. It depends on scaling and it depends on governors, but somewhere in there. And the rest of the system is kind of contributing, kind of like a Steam Deck. The rest of the system is contributing to the rest of that power draw. Steam Deck APU peaks at 15 watts. Steam Deck as a whole probably draws somewhere around 20. I think that's the ballpark for what this is doing. So what if we took X Elite and we jumped from a 15 watt SoC, added cooling so that you could handle the additional heat, and now it's drawing 30 watts. Okay, well that's different. But that's not what the reference design is. The reference design is an 80 watt system. So we don't know how high can you really drive X Elite, and what does that really mean for all of these performance and benchmark scores. And we won't know that, unfortunately, until companies start making systems out of this chip. So yeah, Michael Peppertech, seeing what Apple has done with Apple Silicon, I'm excited to see competition in the ARMS race. When an M1 MacBook Air base model outpaced my Ryzen 2700X and RTX 2070 OC and 32 gigabytes of RAM on my desktop. I have been an insufferable nerd pointing to LumaFusion. LumaFusion on a last generation Android phone running a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 is neck and neck for rendering a similar quality of video as my Threadripper 4070 Ti running in DaVinci Resolve. DaVinci Resolve is a much more robust editing suite than LumaFusion on Android. But if I care about stitching pieces of video together, putting in transitions, putting in a watermark, adding a soundtrack, and pumping out a video, I can do that as fast or faster on a phone as I can on my big beefy workstation desktop. And I don't need to wait to put those video files on my workstation. I can edit directly from the phone. Like even if I shoot on a standalone camera in the field, I can move those files over and start editing on the phone. So I feel a lot of us in tech enthusiast land, those folks who are just so deep in the weeds on all of the granular bar graphs that they see on a Gamer's Nexus video, have completely missed where ARM has gone over these last couple years, where MacBooks and M series processors, where Snapdragons and Dimensities, what the real compute capabilities are. The Dimensity 9300 is pacing 12th gen Core i7s at 15 watts. 15 watts is a lot for a phone, but imagine if you could put that Dimensity 9300 into a laptop shell with active cooling. Why wouldn't you want to do that? I mean, if you could have 12th gen Core i7 performance at 15 watts, wouldn't most of us be excited about that? But no, we're going, but AMD has this and this APU and it's going to be more performant in the multi-core scores and blah, 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 blah. And you're like, that's great. But show me what touches the performance per watt on an X Elite or on a Dimensity or on a Snapdragon. You can't do it with Intel or AMD right now. AMD is great. The products have never been more competitive. I love all the little mini PC builds that I've been playing with lately. None of them are hitting 15 watts at peak performance. So I am super anxious. I really feel now Qualcomm has done what they need to do. They've shown us what we need to see from them. Their part of the conversation is covered. And now we need to see what the OEMs are going to give us. And I'm really worried that we'll get some OEMs that price way too high, way too aggressively. I think we're going to get some OEMs that just pump out some garbage. Because who really cares about Windows on ARM? We'll make something that's kind of like a Chromebook. And you're like, it needs to be something right in that sweet spot for MacBook competition. And when we get that, I think we'll have some really exciting things to show consumers, reasons why they might want to upgrade from an older Windows laptop. Even a laptop purchased at the beginning of the pandemic now is a good time frame to say, hey, are you getting out a bit more? Don't you want a machine that's going to live away from a charger a bit better? Isn't that what Apple has been so successful with? Wouldn't you like to see that on a Windows tablet that can offer MacBook grade performance? I love this thing. This is like whenever I do leave my office with a computer, it's usually this, just because I like the battery life. So, yeah, exactly, MPT. Fanless and extra long battery life along with crazy good performance is finally coming to the Windows side without sacrifice. And we could be seeing, what if you could build an entire computer at lower power draw than just the M2 chip? Because I believe TDP on an M2 is something like 25 to 30 watts, and someone will have to correct me on that. That was already an incredible achievement over the Intel processors we were getting before. Now, it's like we're talking about an entire system that's running just under the thermal load of what a MacBook chip could do. So, oh yeah, Geet Madden, and this is the other thing that we did mention. Geet says, Microsoft seems to be caring about other things, though. I wish Microsoft supports this transition with updates to the translation layer. Currently, they are just focused on AI and copilots. So that's not entirely true. I gotta say, from the 8CX Gen 2 to the 8CX Gen 3, Windows on ARM has gotten a lot better. And especially its ability to also plug into other things too, like emulation for Linux in Windows on ARM, on an ARM chip. Phenomenal. It's really good. You can run Ubuntu inside Windows 11 and often get better app performance than Windows native apps. But it's a complicated and messy and geeky conversation to try and extend to other people. So someone's going to pick up a Windows on ARM laptop, try and dig up some old utility that hasn't been updated since Windows 7, and then go, see, it doesn't work, and it just works, which we never would have complained about on a MacBook. We give Apple infinite runway to get stuff right. Like, it's only just been in the last month that a MacBook can now use two external displays and turn off the built-in screen. And we're acting like, yeah, that's the way it's supposed to be. See, Apple's getting it done right. Like, well, but that was a problem. You didn't act like that was a problem when the MacBook could only use one external display. But now we're going to freak out if like someone's, I don't know, like DVD library program that had to run in Windows 98 compatibility mode is now broken because it can't access a library on Windows on ARM. Because that's what the average consumers care about is legacy compatibility modes. And I'm tired. I'm too old and too tired to care about that. So, let's go ahead and wrap this up, folks. Thank you for going with me on this extended, casual, rambling conversation. There is crazy exciting stuff happening. I am really stoked to be joining these conversations with you fine folks and to be digging in a little bit deeper. I would love to follow up the DOJ complaint. Maybe dedicate a much smaller portion of next week's show to a conversation about this. And if I can figure it out, I would love for this to be an open audio town hall. So for next week's podcast, again, in lieu of the more traditional structure that I usually put on my podcasts, if we open up a part of it to making it more of a call-in show, and people who have read the complaint, not just, oh, I saw someone on MacAppleFanboys.net say it was bad, and Walt Mossberg said it was laughable. Read the complaint. Why do you need to rely on someone like Walt? If you made it to this live stream or you're listening to this replay show, you know how to operate a web browser. You can just go and read it yourself. And then maybe we can all just kind of have an open conversation about some of the specifics about their arguments and what we think might be the evidence they're going to use in court to try and make some of these arguments. And that, to me, I think is an interesting conversation and hopefully one that we can keep following and keeping up with as this case actually makes it into the courts. So, thank you so much. Again, all the folks who were supporting, seeing some Twitch subscriptions and then people sharing, and this was a pretty heavily watched show considering what the title of this week's episode was. I was very surprised to see the view count actually climb higher than our average. So I know that there's an interest in some of this stuff, and I think we can work through it. We can work through it together. Be on the lookout for videos and articles and editorials and all of the other people that are doing awesome streams this week. Gadget Goddess, me and TK on Thursday, LaShawn, the Tech Preacher, Easy Computer Solutions. I think, is Ike, someone please say down in here if Ike's streaming on Thursday. He's one of the nicest guys in tech. And then all the videos that are going to be coming out too. This is a really great time to catch up, as the major hardware announcements from the beginning of the year have kind of slowed back down. Now we're getting all of the conversations about really using and living with this stuff. And that to me is so much more interesting than just, it arrived and I unboxed it and let me read the specs at you. That's lame. The good stuff is happening now. So hopefully you're staying plugged in. Folks, I want you to have an amazing week. I want you to do awesome with your technology. I want you to be awesome with your technology. And I want you to take care of yourself so you can keep taking care of others. You can be the good tech neighbor. I know all the folks in this chat are. Be safe, take care, and I'll catch you back.